Can you hear me now?
Yes, there we go.
Excellent. Here we go. Let's start again. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending from where you're dialing in. I'm Lucille Cornet. I'm a partner at Eight Road Ventures. We're a global VC fund investing at scale-up stage. We're very proud and happy investors in Spendesk, amongst others, but also backers of companies like HiBob, iCertis, AppsFlyer, Kaiko, Reveal, and a few others. And I'm really delighted today because we have a great panel with two very, very successful companies in their own markets, Rob from Sixth Sense and Philippe from Deel. I let them introduce themselves in a second, but I wanted to welcome everyone to the panel. I think today we'll speak a lot about internationalization, going abroad, and obviously what it means from a finance and CFO office standpoint. I think for the people who are joining us at the moment, we'll run a poll on the right side of your screen in a few seconds. I'd love to hear from the audience how international your company is today. I think it will give us a good sense of where people are in their journey of internationalization. But before we kickstart, maybe Rob and Philippe, can you introduce yourself in a few minutes and give us a little bit of context around your own international journeys with Sixth Sense and with Deel. Rob, do you want to get us started?
Sure, I'll go first. I'll be brief and go while Philippe gets himself off mute as well. So I'm the CFO of Sixth Sense. Very, very shortly, we're a growth equity-backed enterprise software business. And our business model is a subscription business model. What we do is, well, we're focused on B2B revenue teams and helping them do everything from identifying their addressable market to prioritizing the companies to go after within that TAM, all the way through to actually generating pipeline and closing deals. And to provide context, Lucille, we're an approximately 1,200 person company, and we have legal entities in the US, which is our headquarters country, but also in India, the UK, Singapore, and Canada.
And dialing in from the East Coast. So thanks for joining us early in the morning, Rob. Philippe?
Yes. Okay, so I'm Philippe. I'm the CFO of Deel, PhD computer science, third life after first international company I built and took to stock market when I was a kid. And then I was on your domain, Lucille, investing for a few years in 300 companies. And I came back to work in this new family ventures, Deel 5 years ago. So I'm the CFO there and the chairman. So Deel is a pretty international company, 120 subsidiaries in the world. So a pretty huge presence. What we do is that we are helping company to hire, pay, and manage their team. So basically, using Deel, you can super easily hire a contractor or hire an employee through us, then pay them, manage them. And also, we offer global services, in terms of payroll, meaning that we help customers to be able to see in one place, all their employees or contractors or EOR or contingent, and understand, and align their benefits and their payroll. Deel is a 2,700 people company today, growing pretty fast, probably going to grow like 2.2 times this year, around $400 million revenue for 2023. I believe the company is profitable for a year now. So pretty active, as you can understand.
Yeah, and you've been a great enabler yourself, obviously, of companies trying to go abroad. So I'm sure we'll come back to that. I'll just remind for people joining us that they can go in the poll section on the right side of your screen to tell us how international you are yourselves as a business. But maybe to get us started, I think one question I think is helpful to start with is why going international in the first place. And there could be many reasons from expanding your market, proving milestones, hiring. But I'd love to hear, I guess, Rob and then Philippe, some of your thoughts around from your different experiences, both at 6 Sense and maybe before. What could be the drivers to go international?
Sure, I'll kick it off here. The way I look at it, there are 3 high-level reasons. One is cost avoidance, one is talent sourcing, and then the third is just increasing your addressable market or your revenue. For 6 Sense, our first expansion was a combination of cost avoidance and talent sourcing. We went into India primarily to find engineering talent. That's the sourcing piece. And the cost avoidance piece is that engineering talent could be more economical than finding it in the San Francisco Bay Area, where it's very expensive. So that was a blend of the two. And then our second large expansion was into the UK, and that was to access essentially additional companies to sell our product to. But going back to the high level, it's usually one of those 3 reasons, and it's normally a push, I would call it, right? Something in your business is saying, oh, we need more of XYZ employees, or we need better margins at this part of our P&L, or, well, we can't sell enough in our home country. Time to look abroad.
That makes a lot of sense. And Philippe, what have you seen?
I would say that same like Rob, but maybe a bit different order. I believe that the first reason to go international is very clearly, talent acquisition. It's not only a question of price, but finding the right person to fill up a role with the right experience. And I think that should be the first thing you want to look at, today, especially if you're a startup. The second thing, is obviously leveraging a global workforce to stay competitive on the global market. The market is going global. If you don't go global, you're probably not going to be competitive in terms of margin. That's obvious. So it's kind of, obligation somewhere in a lot of different industries. As the third reason, expansion is for sure. And today, it's so easy to hire people internationally, not trying to push more Deel here, but you have tons of companies like our colleagues, doing the same, helping you, to recruit the first people, and taking on them the burden of expansion. So I would say that today there is no reason, unless your business is super local, not to try and go for expansion. The cost is really reduced today. As for Deel, we are a cross-border company, so by default, international.
Yeah, I find it fascinating that both of you mentioned talent as the first point, because a lot of early stage companies think of it as a way to increase their addressable market. But of course, talent is a big component. Another thing coming top of mind for me, it could be potentially a IPO story. I'm especially thinking more of European companies trying to potentially list themselves on the public markets. Just having a leg in the US, for example, could be a strong part of the narrative. So that could be also like this idea of going international to as a milestone potentially for IPO or exit or fundraising could be one. And one topic I'd love to double click on is, Rob, you said there is sometimes a bit of a push inside your organization where you feel it's the right moment. On the other hand, I find that you need to be pretty intentional about going international. Like typically it's not something you can just like iterate quickly on the side. Like it tends to be, those are big decisions. So I'd love to hear your view around how you've done it at 6 Sense. Was it always like very intentional and so true, or sometimes did it just happen organically?
It's never happened organically, except it has. And I'll explain what I mean. So when we went into the UK, we watched and we waited for a number of years to go into the UK. And what we were doing, other than sort of the typical market sizing analysis, is we were saying, okay, UK for us is going to be an outpost to sell and support our product, right? And if you think of the sort of the first order of business when you're opening up a new geography for a sales purpose, well, at least in enterprise software, you have to go out and hire a number of very expensive salespeople. Think in the UK over 200,000 pounds sterling a year, just in terms of their salary and potential commission. And then I think for us, like many in enterprise software sales, the day you hire a salesperson, they're completely unproductive. And we were thinking about hiring anywhere from 4 to 20 unproductive salespeople. And that's just the nature of it, which is a large expense for no return in the very near term. And this goes to the organic piece of your question. What we did while we were watching and waiting is we sold into the UK. Actually, it was primarily the UK, Germany, and Israel out of New York City, and serviced it out of San Francisco. And we waited until we had a couple of things. One was enough of an install base to justify moving the customer support function or opening up a customer support function in London. And then also what we saw is it gave us a better idea of how we could forecast for that region, right? There's nothing better than actually selling, servicing, and having successful customers in a region before you go and formally open up or create an entity there.
So not quite a big bang start, but more start selling in the region, get the proof point, understand the funnel, and then build on that effectively. Very interesting. And one question I had is, what have you found the most challenging in that process? I mean, you've done it a few times and many times for Philippe. Now that you've seen the playbook a couple of times, like, is it the culture? Is it, I guess the admin part of it? And I think we'll get the chance to talk a little bit about the pros and cons about establishing local offices. But what have you found the most difficult to overcome when you do go international?
From my narrow perspective as a finance leader, it's the admin piece, no doubt. And within that, especially the first 2 times we did it, I was shocked at how difficult it was to do simple things. And I'll give you an example. And it was the same in India as the UK. Setting up our bank accounts took 6 to 10 months to set up a simple bank account. And one of them, we were setting up the bank account actually in the UK with the same institution we used in the US, and it still took 8 months. And then as another shocker, we couldn't register the entities without having the bank account.
Yeah, so it's circular, yeah.
And then the banks seemed to want you to have a registered entity in order to open a bank account. It was a catch-22. And for me, I was amazed that while Philippe was saying things on the human capital side are now much easier to set up and start internationally because of companies like Deel, the administrative part seems to have not progressed at all since I started in
There's a business idea right there. Philippe, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience?
Opening subsidiaries. Let's start from the start. So for us, a bit differently than Rob, actually. I'm French, and Alex, the CEO as well, and our partner is from the Valley. We're a Y Combinator company, San Francisco based, but all our network, 2 of the 3 partners is fully European. So we started YC, and we started, to sell in the US, but it was very natural for us to start selling in Europe. So very opportunistic here. And same for the recruitment, when we started, we needed to find people here and there and looking not necessarily for the most expensive people, but some people around. So we started remote from the beginning. So we started in a super opportunistic manner, right? And the deployment came later on. I would say then that it's never a good idea to start by having your own establishment when you start business, right, in a country, because you don't understand what's happening there. So I'm a big believer of the fact that you need to start selling and understanding people and understanding the market go sell. And after you sell and you understand, you see its worth, you understand the constraint and you understand the country, and your company is getting, the sense of what's happening there. On the human side, on the employment side, on the tax side, I think that it's very urgent to be slow in deciding to open your own subsidiary. What will take you after COVID, 6 to 10 months after upset, something like this, or 3 months or 4 months. Even at Deel, when you are opening like few companies per month, I'm telling you, it's not cool at all, right? It's taking so much time to be able to open a company as a subsidiary of an alien company. So this take time, and sometimes you have difficulties that are crazy. Like the guys will tell you, oh, you want to have a company? Your main shareholder needs to be a resident. So can you have a subsidiary there? So depending on the geographies, you really need to have a look, because post-COVID, it's really not so easy to open subsidiaries, and you need to have precise look at it and precise look at the compliance. There is nothing worse than to understand 1 or 2 years after that you are not compliant. And sometimes you're not compliant, you cannot do it again. So imagine now you have customer, you onboarded people, and you see that, well, the way you build a company doesn't work. So you need to create a new company, put the right compliance, and transfer all what you had there. That's not an easy story. And I would say that especially on the HR side, countries are becoming tougher and tougher. And if you started a company without some license that you needed on the HR, eventually the only solution for you will be to close the company and open a new one, praying that you're not going to have a fine because you started too early, right? So urgent to be slow in opening subsidiaries.
Yeah.
Actually, I have to pile onto that one, Philippe, because something you said resonated, especially when you said fine, because a fine, like that's a specified amount in whatever the local currency is bad. But at least in my mind, it's not the worst possible outcome. Even closing the entity and reopening, which is really bad, isn't the worst possible outcome. It's creating permanent establishment in a company, in a country, which it's more than a fine. Sometimes the penalty is a % of revenue forever. And we were ruthless about avoiding that. So we don't have to worry about it. Now, I'm sure there's something we've messed up somewhere, and maybe we'll pay a fine, but at the very least, we don't have to worry about permanent establishment.
Yeah, and you have countries where the fine is going to the customer, which is even nicer. Suddenly, a customer calling you into, I just received a $200,000 fine to pay, and they want to lock my account, to freeze my account, etc. What's happening there, and we've got some customers in this case, and it's a bit punitive like this, but Switzerland and Germany are very keen on doing that, going on your customers and put them fines, or even worse, let's not make it, too terrible, okay? But yes, at least fine can happen, and worse if people think that you did it in bad faith.
Yeah, no, I think those are obviously very good points and stories to avoid. I found interesting what you said, Philippe, in the early part of your answer, which you had a very international team and international culture from the get-go, right? Because you were, as you said, two co-founders that were French, but you did YC based in Silicon Valley, and I think maybe there's also like sort of an answer there, right? Like you were very multicultural.
Yeah, and my third co-founder, the CRO, is Chinese from the Valley. So yeah, very, very multicultural from the.
So thinking of that diversity of the core team very early on, I think is very critical, especially now in this world where you could, have that, diverse teams that are potentially remote working together. I just want to remind everyone that they can ask questions in the question tab. So feel free to add. I see already a few of them, but feel free to add them there, and we'll ask them at the end. One topic I wanted to address is how much work did you do before entering a country? Did you go through like a full study? Did you look at competitors, market size? ways of working, and also like who was involved in that decision? Is that something that stayed in the leadership team, went all the way to the board? I'd love to go through that process. Rob, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll go first. It's a very long question. I'll try to just take a part of it. We started on a whole number of market studies, and we considered getting an outside or management consultant firm and bringing them in. But ultimately, what we decided is we innovate on software for revenue teams. Beyond that, we can run a standard playbook. We're an enterprise software company. Plenty of enterprise software companies were founded in one country and expanded into others. And we just looked at where other folks expanded and picked the expansion path that looked the best for our company, right? And for us, it was India for engineering talent and the UK for that sort of next sales hub. Philippe, what you were saying before about the founders, 2 of our founders were from India, which made that expansion to say India over potentially Poland for engineering talent. It just made India more obvious for us. So I don't want to say we didn't do a ton of work, but we looked at what other folks had done and picked the path that worked the best for us. Now, of course, we have to go justify it to the board, and we had to do our homework. And that was a little bit of a process. But ultimately, I would say that selling it to the board was the least difficult thing we did, because also, as Philippe was saying, companies are international now, and it's a well-worn path, and it's for obvious reasons.
Philippe, any thoughts on
absolutely.
What look like?
Board doesn't have much to say on opening a country today. It's just natural. You just open a company because you need to open a company. So the question is not about hey, are we going to open a company there? I mean, depends what you are. If you need to install manufacturers and plants and invest dozens of millions, I believe that yes, you need your board approval. But if you are in a light investment cycles, it's a bit different. After this, the decision for sure is taken by leadership, but it comes from the team and from operation as well. There is a moment when we feel like hey, there is business there, or marketing will tell you, hey, we tested the market, and we often do that at Deel, right? To test the marketing ways, and then to start to eventually onboard customers pretty early. So the advantage of Deel is we don't do local business, right? So to work with local customer, I don't need an entity. I can do it from anywhere. I need the entity to serve my customer from other countries. So it's a bit different. It's a bit easier on this side. But I would say that probably small marketing test before even though for sure you will need to be there. The question is you need to put priorities, right? When opening countries, if you really go global. And marketing, marketing growth, right? I think is the right test, right, to go. But stay also opportunistic. You find the right talent. Well, it's the opportunity. We've been very much like this at Deel, a bit less now because we're a bit bigger, but we still, looking at the market, listening to the market, and take the wave. Take the wave, go with it, be fluid. That's the recall I can give.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that also from the investment standpoint, where, as you said, like if you can test things and you see early proof points in a way, that's your best case, right? To make potentially to a board to say like, hey, look at the early signs of traction, as opposed to do a very complex consulting, TAM analysis that is very top down. Sometimes just seeing like the proof points on the market is your best friend, right? And to your point, be a bit opportunistic about things. So yeah, all good points. Maybe switching gears for a second, I'd love to talk a little bit about culture, because that's definitely something we see as investors is probably one of the most challenging things when you do go abroad is managing the extra complexity that comes from having different office, having very different cultural backgrounds, and making sure that it stays cohesive, that people understand each other, that everything means the same for everyone. And so both on the customer side, but more importantly on your own internal talent, managing that extra level of time zones, languages, and maybe like ways of working. Maybe Rob, I'd love to hear your experience.
My experience day to day is that time zones are a huge problem. But let's put that aside and talk about the cultural aspect. I think I sort of boil it down into one do and two don'ts. On the do side, it's just to treat the cultural differences as an opportunity. If you think about in the US, there's been sort of this renewed focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion over the last 4 years. And the way we look at it is expanding into a new geography with a different culture is like diversity, equity, and inclusion on steroids, really. Now, what does that mean? It means we have to celebrate that. So, for example, after we went into India, we would celebrate Diwali company-wide. And by the way, I knew very little about Diwali before we opened up operations. Of course, I knew what it was. But I've learned more since we've opened up operations, and it's a cultural opportunity to get your entire employee base more engaged, right? And of course, in these days with some type of remote work environment, employee engagement is harder than I can ever remember it being. And then on the don't side, I would say that one is to don't fall into this trap of thinking that sort of XYZ country or geography is sort of better or worse than the other country or geography at doing something fundamental. And I say that because it goes, it goes towards the second don't, which is letting your new region or your smaller regions feel like an afterthought, right? Because that's the worst thing, right? You spend all this time and effort and money to open up operations somewhere else. And then you treat that somewhere else like it's just that. It's somewhere else, right? Everything happens in the home country, and then you're just a sort of a support function off there, 500 or 5,000 miles away.
Yeah, such a good point. And it can be small things. I know some of my companies, they don't say like HQ, and so for that reason, right? Because you don't want to feel the other people that they're not in HQ, so they're like somehow less important or not in the right place.
But one more point though to make on all this, because you mentioned about cultural impact and managing it with customers. And this goes, just my entire career has taught me that the number one determinant of your customer experience is your internal employee level of satisfaction, right? So if you focus on having engaged, good, and satisfied employees, it will very quickly and relatively easily translate into good customer experience.
Yeah. So if your team is embracing it, everything else will follow, kind of. That's a very good one. Philippe, any thoughts, any advice, any don'ts?
Well, wow, this is a so important question you are asking here, right? And this is something that we deal with every day at Deel, even though we are international and global in our DNA. You absolutely need to have the people happy to be there, working for the same project, understand why they're there, and share the vision. So I think that you have different ways here to address it. I believe everything is available, today to be able to address this problematic. The first thing is that tools. You have all the tools of the world, right, to handle a global organization. Start with Slack, right? Then you continue with Notion. How much it is important to structure your knowledge and make it available in the right manner so that newcomers from any place will be onboarded rapidly and not lost, especially now, in a remote world. You're not going to the office with 100 people there that can help you in a lot of cases. How much it is important to to organize your knowledge, update it, keep it updated, and then you need to put in place the process to keep cohesion and to keep the people aware of what's happening. So, all ends every Thursday in the case of Deel. Sometimes we double it because of time zone. Not so much problem for us time zone. We deal with it, but I understand it can be tough, especially if you do not disperse your execs. So also another point at Deel is that, we want to have people everywhere in every region. We do not have any concentration of execs in one place. Like we're a San Francisco base, I have 2 execs in California, total on 20. And that's also very important so that the mid managers and the employee, they still have someone, that represent the company at a high level. And we never in situation that within a zone or a country, you only have like basic employees and no mid manager and no management. So that's super important. And to develop also a culture, of diversity, as you say, a culture of fairness is super important. I believe that more than this, you have an obligation of monitoring, detection of monitoring of distress at work, especially in a remote world, understanding what's happening, balance between work and life, and that's super important. So on some subject, we pretty engaged at Deel. We are certified 45,003 even and one, for wellness of employees at work. It's remote, but still they are there. So that's something we work on. But you have the tools. If you really care about cohesion, information, keeping the people inside the project, making sure at recruitment that you're recruiting people that they don't want to sit with 20 other people in the same place because this is their way. Because this simply doesn't work. So if you intend to be global, you also need to have people that like it. They like the diversity. They like to have people from different countries. They don't have any issues, to communicate virtually and to meet each other maybe only once a quarter or something. So I think, that's super important. It's a pretty long answer. Sorry for this, but this is critical. For Deel at least, this is critical.
I think it's a great answer, and at least from my perspective, I've also seen the companies that, to your point, have almost built themselves with that in mind are much better suited, right? So it's much harder if you've built a company for 5 years, let's say in France or in Germany, and then you suddenly say, oh, now let's go abroad to change these things. So it's much easier to build them from the core, even if you don't open international, but at least you know that it's going to be the plan. And to your point, you can hire people that embrace it and will welcome it. Maybe I'm going to switch to questions because there are a lot of questions, and I think our favorite topic around subsidiaries versus not. So the first question is: in which case should a subsidiary be created, and in which case is it not necessary? Philippe, you want to go?
This one. I'm taking this one. So Rob will not say he's always taking all, but you're right. So, okay. So I will come back to what I said before. If you can delay it as much as you can. That's for sure, because you need to focus on your own business, right? So that's the first point. Then, if you are acting locally, giving local services at customer site every day, you better open your permanent establishment as soon as possible, because anything can happen, and your people going everywhere, etc., etc. So I would say that for sure, 1 to 3 employees, it's okay. But after this, if what you do is virtual, if what you do, doesn't necessitate, going on site, if you don't need to have that on your invoicing because you because you deliver software, for example, etc., you're not in a rush. Okay, we have customers at Deel with more than 100, 200 people, and they don't have a permanent establishment. But at the moment when you start to have a really strong local activity, and I would consider that from 50, 75 people, you really need to ask yourself the question. Then eventually, it's not worth taking the risk to be in a situation where you will be caught, having this permanent establishment, and then the regulator, will come and say, okay, we think that 50% of all your turnover has to pay corporate tax here. And by the way, you should have paid that on every single invoice you have for blah, blah, blah. So I think that, the assessment of permanent establishment needs to be taken from the moment where you have more than 5-10 people. It's not happening every day that you're going to have problems, right? It's happening so not often that you hear about this, but it's happening. And when it's happening, can be tough. And on a startup, you can close your company on it, right? So you need to assess it. And the main story is about, so you're doing business there. How much is it local? That's, how much service, how much is it on site? And this is the key point, on a permanent establishment notion.
Very interesting. So it sounds like you're saying until 5-10 people, you're good to go, and after that you can still go, but you need to be a bit more.
You need to assess. If you're really not acting locally on site, etc., you have time. I mean, but let's say, for example, that not locally, but you have 75 engineers doing 100% the IP of the company. You better think. Okay, it's also depending what you do. But I mean, you need to consult your tax advisor there. It's important.
I was just going to add, the second you have one person, I would start talking to the lawyers. We came up with a thing, for example, where we were looking to have just one salesperson in Germany, and we checked, and apparently if we did that, it would start the clock. I think it's an 18-month clock where after 18 months, we either had to be in Germany for real, or we had to switch the employment mechanism of that one salesperson. Like in each, I imagine each region has something that can be different to navigate.
Yeah. So make sure you get good advice. Yeah, that sounds like an obvious one.
We can be more precise on what Rob said. The moment there is negotiation on price and people taking orders locally, you have a permanent establishment. So you need to be smart here. So you need advice, but you need to be smart here and doing smartly. Because even if you use companies like Deel to hire your people, for sure it's nicer than to be yourself, right? But still, if the guy is going to negotiate the price, make sales actually sign from there, even your partner will be considered to be your agent, which is exactly the same. So on sales, you have a particular point. Pay attention that the people locally won't make the offers, negotiate the price, etc., etc. So you need to consult. It's always good to consult.
Yeah. So get advice. It's not that easy, and maybe a good.
Don't rush for it, because it can be, if you rush to open a company, you can really make mistake.
Thanks, Philippe. Maybe a good concrete question. Someone is asking, how much does it cost in practice to, between like opening the subsidiary, the local office, setting up payroll, like how much are we talking? Maybe in broad brushes, if you're opening a subsidiary.
It depends on jurisdiction, right? I would say anything between 10 to 20K.
Yeah, and then I would layer in all the other costs, which take that 10 to 20K, and almost immediately at least for us, you're talking 400 to 500,000 US, right? And the other costs include, well, what are you going to do for real estate? People like real estate, and it just spirals. Sorry, if you're hearing some anxiety in my voice, it's because setting up our India entity, I mean, it was $15,000 US for the very narrow piece of setting up the entity. But once we actually had 10 people in Pune, that had ballooned to 150,000 US.
Yeah, if you don't have any problems, because you have a problem, you fire an employee, you have the syndicate falling on you, or whatever you will have, that's it. This is why I'm saying, relax before to open, start a country, before you open the company, wait a bit, right? Take advice, but wait a bit, because it's not just about having an accountant and having a lawyer at the end of the year. This is not the case. What about insurances? What about problem, that you could have with tax authorities? What about the fact that, people will want to have some offices and tons of things that come with a company. To open a company, have a running business, understand what you're doing, have 1-2 guys that understand also, because you want to speak with the lawyer. Who is going to speak with the lawyer? So now you're in China. You're going to speak with the lawyer? You're not going to speak with the lawyer. You won't understand one word what he's telling you. So you need to have people on the field that you can trust. So the best is to have your own people, because your own people will translate you. What is said, and you can trust them. It's not like you will think, these advisors look very nice, he's going to advise me, So, cost a lot, but to be very precise on your question, set up 10 to 20K.
Yeah, set up only. Yeah. And one interesting question someone is asking is it better to have local finance team, or do you have finance team all in one place? Like, I'm very curious about your own setup.
I'll start there and say, I think the standard way to go is you outsource at least the accounting function for a very limited amount of time, and then you bring it in-house. And whether or not you have somebody local or not does not matter as much as how you actually close the books and in what systems, right? So this is an accounting function, not necessarily a finance function. And I say this through experience. When we had our first international subsidiary, we were still on QuickBooks. We were closing the books. Actually, our third party was closing the books for us in a different accounting system. Presumably it was Tally, because that's the only accounting system I know in India. And then we would have to consolidate it. And we waited too long to begin to close it. We use Intact, NetSuite, similar. There are other more powerful ERPs out there than QuickBooks. But getting that all in one system within, call it, the first 12 months was crucial. Sorry, I sidestepped the question, but I think that's more important than necessarily where the finance and accounting team is.
I think it's a great point. And I'd love to hear also more broadly from both of you, like, are there specific tools, things that you would recommend to have in place in the overall finance function that would help once you really start to manage something with several countries, several currencies? Like, any advice on that? Philippe, do you want to start?
So just to bounce on what Rob said, I think that having an ICP or having your own people really depends on the size of the operation you are opening in the country, right? If it's a super strategic organization, you have tons of people, don't play with it and even start with the CFO, local CFO. If it's about a few people and you do small revenue, better to have an ICP. And then if you have several countries like this, you put a regional controller that is making sure that everything working. So it's really a matter of what's the size of business that you are running there, or what the risk that you eventually have there. ICPs is also nice until a certain point where you want to have what you need. I'm not speaking about listed company, etc., which is different in terms of reporting. Eventually, in countries where you will have ICPs, you may make sure to have an audit, yearly audit, to make sure that everything okay. As for tools, the QuickBooks story is very funny. Rob, actually, I got QuickBooks until the product couldn't support the integration of the banks.
Okay.
I've been 25 years as selling ERP system and deploying ERP system, for customers, and I can tell you that as much as you can avoid having an ERP, just avoid, okay, because it doesn't help much. But there is a moment where you need. So I would say that you need to have the right infrastructure with a good ERP for international, at least for finance. You need to have that. Do you need to deploy this tool in every single country? No. As far as you can just integrate inside your main tool to consolidate, for sure not. You could have in one small country, one small product. Especially, in certain countries, go find the guys that know NetSuite, because you also need the guy to know the product and to integrate it. So he's going to use a super heavy tool to deal with a few $1 million business. I'm not sure. So I'm pretty cool on that. The moment when you have the right infrastructure with the right ERP and that you set up your reports in a good manner and your treasury management system, I would say that if you have small countries, why do you need to deploy a big ERP there? Right? You don't need it. So you could have a mix, like we have in Asia Zero, for example, which is a good product until a certain size, and then you just integrate it inside your system. This is true for finance, right? The moment when you're telling me that your ERP also doing your invoicing, that's a different matter, and I would recommend to have one unique tool.
And it's a good one as long as you have also a solid tool at the top to reconcile, right? Yeah. Sorry, Rob.
Sorry. Just one little thing that ends up becoming important is an indirect tax tool. So sales tax and VAT tool. And I could name a couple, but we have two that are customers of ours. So I don't want to pick one over the other, but it gets real.
Go for it. Give the names. I think people like the recommendations.
Yeah.
What are the names? Go for it.
No. I can't say them because.
You can't say. No. But you recommend having one, yeah. Is that a global one that you have for all countries?
The most. I don't know anything that handles all countries.
But most, yeah. Okay. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. There are a lot of good questions, actually. So maybe one question from Brianne. What are there some countries that are easier, faster to set up than others, from your experience?
Philippe, you want to take that one? You've probably done more countries than I have.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, UK. You start UK in 48 hours. It's obvious. And then you want to open a subsidiary in certain countries in LATAM. It will take you ages. Like South Africa, it will take you ages to open. Depends the complexity of your sub, but can take tons of time. For sure, it's super different. US in few hours, UK, a bit longer, but not crazy. So huge difference between countries. Not speaking about the bank account, that can be terrible.
So UK is your pick.
No, I'm just saying you're asking. What is where is it easy to open a bank a company? But be careful opening. And I'm telling to people in the chat, opening a company is something. Opening a subsidiary of your company is something else. Okay, like if you're US, you want to open a company somewhere, they will ask you for stuff to go to the notarium and proof of the signature and this and that. So it seems simple, but the moment it's a subsidiary, it's way more complex.
Makes sense. Given time, maybe one last one from me. What would be your advice from both of you if you were to give one advice, I don't know, to your younger selves before you went international, or for anyone in the chat who is like, let's say in only one main country and really thinking about making that first move about going international? What would be your advice? Maybe Rob.
Make sure your first hire in the new geography is an absolute rock star, just a trustworthy, maybe you don't even need somebody that senior, but hire somebody senior anyway and spend the extra money to do it, because that first hire it's like Socrates said, the most important part of the work is the beginning. And that first hire is the beginning.
That's a great one. Philippe?
Yeah, again, I feel that Rob is right. Depends what kind of subsidiary you build, how big is going to be your operation. If you plan a big operation and you really want to go, for example, to US and develop the market, 100%. And if not, take a good sales.
It's all about talent. Yeah, find that great first hire in that country.
Yeah, obviously.
Rob, Philippe, it was a pleasure. I think we could have kept on going for another hour. You have a lot of experience to share. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.